I got this.
And by the way, you guys are still welcome to get seconds and thirds while you're eating. So.
And I've actually had the honor to hear Bob's mostly finished TED Talk, and it's amazing. I watch a lot of TED Talks, and it's like top notch. So unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to be here next week.
Wait, Bob, is Camilla your coach?
Sure, because it's really
Okay.
good.
Oh. Yeah, he's pretty amazing. So. I got started when I was 15 writing orchestral music. I went to UCLA for film scoring, University of Utah for jazz comp. I finished up at UVU because I had internships with James Newton Howard and Hans Zimmer. And I started the Solid Pops Orchestra, which got millions of views. It was really fun. Got to work with Lindsey Sterling and Alex Boye and Shaun and some other people. We haven't really worked together yet, but we're friends. So.
One day when I'm good enough to work with you.
There you go. I mean, it was a really fun ride, but because of that, I started getting in with a lot of the social media people in Utah. It's the second largest YouTubers group in the world, next to LA, and just got to be really good friends with them. Started doing a lot of social media marketing myself. Got really, really interested in it. And I'm really kind of all about technology and the cutting edge, the leading edge of technology. And so I started Hashtag Studios, which is about streaming video online and getting followers and creating shows and things like that. So anyway, that's kind of my background. Mike and I and David figured out it was a really beneficial thing for us to join forces. And today we're going to be talking about basically defining very specifically what the summit of the mountain that you're trying to climb is. What is that peak? How do we define that peak that you're actually trying to climb? Because if you don't know where that peak is very specifically, you can run into a lot of problems. What we've gone through so far, the last few weeks, is we went over soul purpose, S-O-U-L purpose, which allows us to be very specific as to why we're doing what we're doing. And then the next week we went over North Star. And the North Star values is about our value set, what we are doing to accomplish our soul purpose. So this week again is about summiting. It's about getting very specific on what that is. So I've written a little piece tonight in my head about clarity. To me, clarity, and probably to most of you, clarity may be one of the most precious things we can have in life. Clarity on those things that we really desire. I don't know. To me, once I find that clarity, I just get so excited because I know once I get clarity, it's accomplishable. I can do it. So I'm going to play that, and once I'm done playing that song, I'm going to have Mike start right into his stuff. I'm going to turn off this mic, guys.
The microphone. It's fantastic. Oh,
It's kind of like a sugar plum fairy.
that's fantastic. Probably could do that. Wow. It gets slightly bigger every week, doesn't it? It's fantastic. All right, so what do we got here? Let's do it this way. Cool. So I'm Michael Drew. Every week I'm going to start off the same because there's always new folks. So for those of you that have been here before, please excuse my repetition and enjoy the boring, but we'll have fun with that anyway. My mentor, Roy H. Williams, says that the risk of insult is the price of clarity. Jay Kimball, the swearing prophet in the LDS culture, said in, what was it, a general conference, he was speaking one year and he said, people ask me, this was after the word of wisdom went into effect, how I get away with drinking and smoking and swearing so much. It's because I repent so damn fast. So if you'll forgive me in advance, I spent the last 20 years outside of Utah. I was raised here from birth to 18, and I spent the last 20 years out of Utah and kind of swore I'd never come back, and well, here I am. So would appreciate if you get offended easily or don't appreciate swearing. I probably am not the right flavor for you. For the rest of you, enjoy. You know, I've spent the last 20 years this September, August, September, helping influencers and thought leaders build their what we call marketing platform, their name and reputation within their given industry or niche, and their ability to leverage and capitalize on that. I started off in publishing here in Utah at a small company called Executive Excellence, which was a division of the Covey Leadership Center before it merged with Franklin and became Franklin Covey, and moved from here to Austin, Texas to a small publishing company called Bard Press, where I put my first book, Secret Formulas of the Wizard of Ads by the gentleman I just mentioned, Roy H. Williams, onto the Wall Street Journal at #1 and the New York Times at #3 for his book, Secret Formulas of the Wizard of Ads. And I've been doing that ever since. It's been my life's mission and purpose in helping serve the most influential people in the world. And I'm really honored to be here with all of you today. One of the reasons I came back to Utah was with the purpose and intention of taking the influence and leadership that exists here in Utah that has not yet been able to be shared and promoted with the world, that have the ability and opportunity to share your message and voice in changing the world, because I really believe in what we stand for here in Utah, and I'm really grateful to be here today. In marketing, you'll hear, and one of the reasons I start off by asking for forgiveness in advance for my language is that I use the term douchebag a lot. And you'll hear me use that quite frequently in this presentation today. I come from an industry of douchebags, an industry of douchebag marketers. And douchebag marketers, we call them that because they're like pickup artists. And a pickup artist in the general world outside of the state of Utah anyway, and maybe even in Utah, have one objective. That simple objective is transactional. They want to get laid, right? They have one objective, that outcome. And the truth is, and Nathan mentioned earlier that I'm going to be on this cruise, or Sue mentioned it earlier, for the Women of Global Leadership, which is the name of the group, in Europe next week and the following. I'm going to be talking about the 7 myths of intimacy, which goes into the construct of building intimacy with your audience and customer, and not treating them like many women are treated like outside of Utah in terms of being objectified in the dating and global sense of things. And I have a real belief that we have an obligation to ourselves and to our audience and customers to not treat them as though we're trying to reach into their pants to grab their wallets, right? We have an objective, an opportunity to treat them like real people. And to do that, the difference between being a douchebag marketer and being a business owner of integrity who's interested in building intimacy with our customer is that we value them as people. We value who they are, what they stand for, and what their outcomes and objectives are. But before we can even value who they are, we have to value who we are. I look at business in terms of, I'm going to put this down, a product or service sales where your goals and values meet the goals and values of your customers. If you're here and they're here, it doesn't matter how valuable your offering is. If there's not an alignment with your customer, it doesn't matter. And so in order for us to create alignment with our audience and customers, the first thing that we have to do is define who we are. And define who we are in as clear a sense as we possibly can. The clearer we are about who we are, the clearer our audience is in defining if we should be part of their world. It's why I start off by saying the risk of insult is the price of clarity and sharing the J.W. Kimball quote. Because to me, if you're part of my tribe, we are real, raw, and relevant. We speak the truth because it's the truth. That's who we are, right? And sometimes that requires emphasis, and sometimes we use colorful language to illustrate our point, because that's what we do in our personal lives and in the real world. So we look at defining, again, there's three things that we look at in terms of marketing and building relationship with our audience. The first is define who you are. The second is define who your customer is. And the third is creating a bridge between your objective or outcome and the objective of your audience or customer. And so when we work with customers, what we look at is, in defining who you are, number one, what is your soul purpose, your SOUL purpose? And we believe, and I believe, that everybody that's born onto this planet, and this is a concept, by the way, that I have adopted from my client, Garrett Gunnarsson, who's a financial expert here in Salt Lake City with Wealth Factory, and he's one of the most amazing financial experts that I've ever met, and I've met many, because his value in finance starts with defining what your soul purpose is, that SOUL purpose, that single reason that you're here in support of your fellow man. And that's what a soul purpose is. It's that innate, God-given reason for why you're here. And all of your talents. A soul purpose is not a talent. It's not an experience. It's not an opportunity. It is what you are designed to do. So it's both SOUL and SOLE. It's what you're designed to do in the service of your fellow man. And everything that we do should start from that core. We refer it back to it like an onion. And at the core of the onion is the soul purpose, that you are an onion, the multiple layers of who you are. And that soul purpose is the core of who you are, right? And there are layers that are outside of that, but everything should start with the definition of who you are with that soul purpose. So the first thing that we do, and we did this a couple of weeks ago, is we define what your soul purpose is. Now, once you know that destination, and again, from a metaphor standpoint, for those of you that are new, is we look at life like a journey, right? And that journey is on the ocean of life. And that soul purpose is the destination. It's where we're going. But like any journey on the ocean, before technology, we had to navigate at night. And the reason we had to navigate at night is because there's no fixed point on the ocean. And so in the northern hemisphere, we navigate at night because we had the northern star. It sits over the axis of the Earth. And in the southern hemisphere, for those of you from Australia, we use the Southern Cross because, again, the Southern Cross is over the fixed point of the southern hemisphere. And we use that along with declination and a compass to define whether or not we were in alignment with that direction that we were going with that soul purpose, right? And so the first thing that we do when defining who we are is define that soul purpose. The next thing that we do is define the value that we're using to keep us in alignment to accomplish that thing, to get to that soul purpose, to get to that end result, that promised land at the end of the process, right? And the next thing that we do, and this is something that we'll talk about today, that I'll get into after the break in more detail, is what we call defining and measuring success. For all intents and purposes, we call it the magic wand. And the reason we call it the magic wand is if I said to each of you, here's a magic wand. I'm handing you a magic wand. And you get to wave that magic wand, and we get to fast forward to the day before you die. 30, 40, 50, 60, 100 years out. And we're throwing a party in your honor. And at that party, we're honoring you. What are people saying about you? What people will not say is, she was a fine person. He was a great man. What they'll say is, he changed my life by doing. She changed my heart and opened my mind to. We talk in specifics, not in generalities, at an event like that. And in defining how we look at the promised land, that sole purpose when we're there, what does that look like? What are the hills and trees and mountains and valleys and rivers? We have to know what that looks like. And so we'll be defining what it would look like in that magic wand world at the end of the process. I always start with the end in mind. And when we talk about customers later and get into personas and whatnot, you'll understand that I'm a competitive personality type. I'm goal-oriented. So for me, starting with the end in mind is valuable. And the processes that we bring to you here each week understand the outcome, that end goal, so that we can deconstruct and build that out with you, so that you can get to that end goal. That is a valuable thing to me and within this organization. Other members of the organization, people that come to this event, care about, they're humanistic. They care about each of you on an emotional standpoint, want to make sure that you're taken care of and that you feel good. And those are amazing and wonderful things. And I support those. It's not who I am, but I support those members of the team, which is almost everyone else. But for me, the reason why I've been able to accomplish what I have and why I'm sitting here today teaching and presenting is because I am goal-oriented. I'm focused on the end goal. And we start with the end in mind. And so what we want to start with is how do you define and measure success? So once I know what the end is, then we can work backwards and create what are the sub-steps to be able to get to that end goal. Does that make sense to everybody? And so the first thing that we do is we start with how do you define and measure success, right? That's all part of defining who you are. So once that's taken care of, then we define who your customer is. And this is where I'm really excited with Bob speaking next week and Nathan and Anthony, because they're going to come in and they're going to talk about psychographics, Myers-Briggs, which is a psychographic tool, a personality-based tool, and they're going to talk about how to communicate with different personality types. Because, as I said earlier, your goals and objectives have to meet the goals and objectives of your customers. And so we use a process called persona architecture to define who your customer is, what their values are, what their likes and dislikes are, more importantly, what their languaging is. And in fact, what we're going to talk about is how to create narrative around who they are, where they're coming from, how they got to the point where they need you, and how to map out a buyer's journey. Not dissimilar to the hero's journey of Joseph Campbell, but the buyer's journey. Who are they? How did they get here? Why are they interested in what you're offering? And where do they want to go? And what are the things that indicate to them that they can trust you? Right, once we've defined that, we are going to go back and talk about, again, what I'm talking about next week on the Women of Global Change cruise, which is the 12 steps of intimacy. And I'm a big disbeliever in sales funnels. I believe that sales funnels are for douchebags. Sales funnels are a push process. Sales funnels are about sales. The difference between selling and persuasion is the difference between being a pickup artist and building a long-term relationship. It's the difference between building intimacy versus getting that transaction, right? And what I'm most interested in for my customers, and I think listening to all of you talk about what you do within your businesses, you're not in the none of you that I heard are in the business of selling a transactional product. You're not selling a can of soup. You're not selling rocks for the yard. You're selling something that requires the psychological connection to someone else. And when you're dealing with psychology, you have a responsibility to the other person to be able to understand who they are and how they think and what motivates them and also what turns them off and also what's going to cause damage to them. Does that make sense to everybody? And so for me, when we look at mapping out a sequence of engagement with someone, we're not looking at the sequence to proverbially getting laid, that is a transaction, that is getting the currency of money, but rather we're looking at the currency of intimacy. We're looking at the depth of the relationship. And one of the things that we talk about in the 12 steps of intimacy is that there are 4 currencies that we exchange in life and business. Money is just one currency that's exchanged. Time is a currency. Information is a currency. Energy is a currency, and money is a currency. And knowing what currency is appropriate at what point of the relationship building process is what's critical. Right? It's not about getting to the lifeblood of business, which we're all business owners. We all have a need to have the lifeblood currency of money. But to our audience and customers, that in most cases is not the most important currency. In many cases, time is the most important currency, or information is a more important currency, or energy is a more important currency. And so what we look at when we look at building intimacy with our customer is that exchange of currencies, and the right kind of currencies and the amount of currencies between the two parties in building relationship with that other party. When you build a relationship with a significant other, whether they're a friend, or they're someone that you have a romantic interest in, or a girlfriend or a spouse, you don't simply get into the transaction of chemical release or even emotional release. There is a process that we all go through. And it's important to remember that in business, our customers are people too. They are no different. They are no different than building a relationship with someone in the real world from a business standpoint. Our customers are equally people, and they want to be respected as well. And so when we look at building influence, when we look at building a platform, when we look at building the ability to change the world, we have to be able to align who we are with who our customers are in a respectful way that builds intimacy and trust. And so part of the process of what we're going through in these weekly events is to be able to not only inspire you that you can go out and build an audience and engage with them and build a platform and know that you can do it, but more importantly, we're giving you the tools to be able to do it in an authentic way. I mentioned earlier that this was part of my coming home to Utah. This is part of me coming here to be able to share an authentic message about how to, and tool set to be able to share voice. I have a lot of friends that I put into the douchebag marketer space, and they're close friends. I'm not saying they're douchebags as individuals. I'm saying their processes and systems are akin to being pickup artists. And they've all come to Utah, and they've all tried to work with the business owners and the influencers here, and they failed. And the reason for that, whether you're LDS or not, is that there is a value set in the state of Utah that does not align with being a pickup artist, does not align with the value set of the douchebag marketers. And therefore, it has not been accepted. Even the closest member of the LDS Church by the name of Russell Brunson has only somewhat been accepted into the Utah culture because he is still utilizing pickup artist mentality. And what I'm here to tell you is you don't have to be that way. You don't have to utilize pickup artist tactics and tools to be able to build intimacy. And you know this because you live here, you have friends, and you have intimate relationships that did not require you using douchebag tactics to build those relationships. And this is why when these marketers come in with tactics and systems that sound like they could get a result but are not akin to your value set, you don't align with them. And my hope is, again, within what we're doing here and building this community, is to be able to give you the tool set to do that. When Bob talks next week, he's going to come in and he's going to talk about anxiety, he's going to talk about emotional connection as it pertains to voice. You know, one of the hardest things for people to do, there was a study done a few years ago that said public speaking was a greater... it created more scarcity in people than death, right? People would rather die than be out in public, which is, to me, bizarre, but it's a real thing. And the truth is, every one of us, no matter whether we're willing to go out and be in public or not, have some level of scarcity as it pertains to sharing our voice. And the truth is, the only way that we as individuals or within our organization can change the world is by having the courage to share our voice. As I said before, we all have a sole purpose, and we're all here in the service of our fellow man, in the service of each other. And the way that we do that is by taking the voice that we've been given through the experiences and sharing it with others, and doing it in an authentic way. And my hope and belief is that we're able to give you in these weekly events both the courage and the tool set to be able to share your voice. So again, Bob is going to come in and talk about that next week, and then he's going to and then Nathan and Anthony, who's an amazing gentleman, Anthony Garcia, is going to come in and talk about Myers-Briggs and buyer personas, so that you can start to map out what the buyer journey is, so that you know who your customer is, how they think, their languaging type, so that when you start to share your authentic message, you're able to do it in a way that is conveyed and understood by your audience. And I'm really excited. I know that I'm going to be in Europe, and I'm excited to be there, but I'm excited for the opportunity for Bob, Nathan, and Anthony to come and share that with you next week. So I would invite you to come out. One thing I'd like to convey to the group is that this group is not about me. This is not about Nathan. This is not about Bob. This is about creating a community. And the greatest thing that we can give you is each other. And I really want you to take advantage when you come out for the meals in advance, for the breaks in between, and afterwards, to take the time to really get to know each other, to engage and converse, and really find that alignment with each other. Because in truth, our greatest strength is not ourselves, but each other. And again, we are here not for ourselves, but in the service of our fellow man. Those of you that have been here a few times have heard me say this. My mentor, Roy Williams, he's also the co-author on Pendulum, told me when I was 25. We were in New York City. We were walking the streets of New York City after Book Expo America, which is the largest trade convention in the world for publishing. He said, Michael, the winners and losers in life are determined when the teams are picked. There are two teams that are essential for your success. The first are the team of people who select you to be on their team. And the second are those who you select to be on your team. In my life, I have been exceptionally blessed to have been chosen by some of the most brilliant men and women in the world to be on their team. And conversely, I've been incredibly blessed to be able to put some of the most brilliant men and women to be on my team. And you're meeting some of them here tonight. But also, I want to invite each of you to know that by being here, by being part of this community, you're choosing to be part of my team. You're choosing to be part of this collective of folks who know that they're here for a bigger reason, that are here to change their family, their church, their business, their community, their nation, their world. We are here to be able to do that, and I'm really excited about being able to share that with each and every one of you. So again, tonight, we're going to talk about how we define and measure success, what we call the magic wand. It is actually, in my opinion, the single biggest mistake that the douchebag marketers make, is that they don't start with the end in mind. Rather, they start with the tactic. They start with, well, let's maybe create a product and test it out on one medium, Facebook, Twitter, radio, whatever, and see if it works. And there's not a problem in testing a product or service if you know what your final outcome is. I will use a similar tactic when I need to test a message or a particular product, but I already know where I'm going. I already know what I'm attempting to do. So we, again, define knowing thyself as first knowing your sole purpose. Well, my sole purpose and the sole purpose of our organization is voice. We help our customers find their voice, test and refine their voice, and ultimately share and amplify their voice. Now that we know that, now that we know where we're headed, the next thing that we define is how do we know that we're in alignment? Again, that's the North Star value. And our North Star value is it real, is it raw, and is it relevant? And a North Star value is really powerful if you understand that tool set, if you understand the definition of what that is, can be used to either define whether something is a good opportunity or how to deal with conflict resolution. Now, real, raw, and relevant may not necessarily sound like a strong or powerful North Star, but if you know how we define it in our organization, you know where it comes from, which is the research that Roy and I did for Pendulum, and you understand how we apply it, it's a very powerful tool. So once you define sole purpose, then you define your guiding North Star value, then we look at the destination. So we know the sole purpose, which is the line we're going to. Once we're there, what does that look like? How do we define and measure the success that we're going to go on, that we're going to create over here? In our organization, we know, as a matter of fact, that if you want to change any group, any organization, any government, any institution of any kind, that change happens when you influence and change only 3%. If you can change the actions of 3% of any group, you will change the entirety of that organization. 3%. My and our sole purpose is about voice. And it is therefore our definition and measurement of success that our magic wand, that we want to help 480 million people throughout the world. And we define and measure reaching and influencing 480 million people by having those 480 million people spend $1 or more on buying any of our customers' products or services. 480 million people, and we can change the world. Now, I can't do that myself. We can't do that ourselves. We have a voice and a mission and a purpose and a direction on how to get there, and we can define it. But we do that through supporting each and every one of you and every one of our clients influence and impact the lives of other people. And so when we talk today about how we define and measure success, it's really important that we define the number of people that we want to influence and how we measure that. So our outcome is 480 million people, or 3% of the world population. If that number grows over time, great. There's the world population, but it's 3% of the world population. How do we measure that? Through helping those folks, or having those folks spend $1 or more on our clients' products or services. That could be buying an app, that could be buying an ebook, that could be attending an event, it could be anything, right? Because I can't control outside of that with my customers, with my clients, with our audience, with who we work with, what their customers do with their content. Our objective as a marketing agency is to get our clients to get customers who are engaging to the point where they're buying something, spending some currency at that level. Does that make sense to everybody? And so what we want you guys to do in the second half of this evening is come up with a very clear outcome of how you define and measure success. One of the clients, and I do happen to use the same stories over and over again, so I apologize in advance. I've only been in business 20 years, maybe another 20 years I'll double the number of stories that I have. But one of the customers that we've worked with is John Maxwell. John Maxwell is a really well-known leadership expert. And after Stephen R. Covey died, he became the biggest in the world. He's a former evangelical pastor out of Atlanta, Georgia. Brilliant man. He's written, at last count, 98 books. And he's had 12 New York Times bestsellers and 2 #1 New York Times bestsellers. One of the most influential thought leaders and influencers in the space of leadership in the world. And John wanted to transform the evangelical community. He wanted them to accept the concepts, tenets, and principles of the personal development and New Age communities. What he recognized was that the personal development industry had a set of principles that were valid irrespective of your moral, ethical, or religious backgrounds, and that even could be applied within Christianity. But the evangelical world specifically rejected those principles because they viewed personal development as its own religion in the worship of the self. But John said, well, that's just not the case, so let's transform and take these Christian principles, and apply it to Christianity and take that to the world. And so he wanted to transform the evangelical world with personal development. And so we said, so how do we define and measure success? He said, well, what I'd like to do is get 1 million folks. So yeah, give me a number. 1 million folks to tell a story of an act of significance, of living a life of significance. So cool, I have a number now, and I even have a pseudo measurement. His measurement is I want 1 million folks telling a story of an act or living a life of significance. So knowing that the outcome was a story, it was simply a question of, well, how do we measure that? Because it's difficult to measure public stories. Certainly, we could measure the number of people in this room or watching us on Facebook Live now. That is a way to do that, but it's not a really valid way to be able to measure most folks' stories. Most people don't do this kind of work. And so what we did is we created an online program, a 30-day journey with John Maxwell. And every day there was a video. And the video had a story, it had a set of nuts and bolts, and it had a request for action of the viewer of the video. And every day, the viewer of the video was asked to go out and take a specific action and come back and, tell that story in that technology. So we were able to measure the telling of that story, and that technology also happened to be available to the masses and could be shared in social media, so that story could be spread with a wider audience, so that more people could be inspired by the actions of people taking a daily action of significance every day for 30 days. And we were able to reach 1 million actions, 1 million people telling stories of living a life of significance by creating a technology that was able to measure that. Does that make sense to everybody? So for me, before we move into being able to understand your customer, we have to really understand how we define and measure success. It's one of the most important things that we do, and from a business and marketing standpoint, it's what we have to do before we go to strategy or tactic. Again, I refer back to the Detroit marketers because they'll start with a tactic, and they'll let the tail wag the dog. Right? They start off with the tactic and then let that dictate the outcome for the business. And what I'm here to tell you is, if you're in charge of your life, if you are the navigator in your life, if you have something you're trying to accomplish, the tactic never, ever, ever gets you there. You don't go into war with a tactic. You go into war with an outcome. We're going to unite our nation. We're going to become a sovereign nation, and we're going to not be under the rule of the British. Right? We are going to be our own United States. It's not, it'd be nice if we didn't pay taxes, or we had this thing or that thing, we had these nice things that would be nice. No, we, as a group of states, are going to be indivisible from and different from the rule of the British. We are different from and separate from. We have an outcome. And we are going to have a set of strategies that includes economic, political, and war tactics that will help us accomplish those things. Right? We didn't just start fighting the British. We went to France and to Spain. And we got their support, and we got them to also find grievances with the British and to get into conflict with the British as part of our overall strategy. Right? We had an outcome, we had a strategy, and we had a set of tactics that supported that. And our greatest tactician was General Washington. Right? He was the greatest tactician on the ground to be able to figure out what the British was doing and to work with the Allies on the ground to be able to figure out how to defeat in a tactical sense. But without, say, the work of, Benjamin Franklin, we wouldn't have been able to finance the war. Without the support of the Continental Congress, we wouldn't have had the somewhat support of the various states. We had to have all of these tactical things in support of our strategy, which was in support of our outcome. And my hope and objective this evening is to be able to help us, for ourselves, our lives, and our business, be able to define what our outcome is. How are we defining and measuring success? So we're going to take a quick break, but before we do, we have an amazing presentation. I wanted to make sure that so one of the things that we talk about in content creation, communication, and promotions is that there are 4 keys of, 4 pillars of effective communication. Number 1 is a big idea. Number 2 is the nuts and bolts. Number 3 is story, and or entertainment. And number 4 is hope. And so a lot of what I've done in the first segment here is give the big idea and the hope of what we're doing. But we're going to go into the second half with the nuts and bolts. We're going to actually create a kind of a vision board for you of what your magic wand life would look like. But before we get there, I wanted to have Shaun Barrowes come up and give us the story, the entertainment for the evening. Because, of course, I can sit up here and pontificate and talk all evening, and it might be entertaining, it might be boring, you might like me, and you might not. But what I know to be true is that effective communication requires the ability to entertain, and we do that through stories. So I want to have Shaun come up and perform for us, if that's all right. And then afterwards we'll have a little bit of a break, and then we'll move into defining what our magic wand life looks like. Thank you, Shaun.
Okay, thanks. All right, and I guess I can totally confirm what he's saying. That as I'm looking back on a lot of the success that I've had, it's been primarily because I actually care about the musicians I'm helping and don't see them as a product. And I know that they can appreciate that. So generally, what I've seen is by giving to musicians, they end up giving back, and they appreciate the relationship. So I've definitely been able to develop a lot of relationships, and for a long time, actually, it ties them with the teenagers, because a lot of us are working with teens. I did a high school tour for 4 years, and just mentored kids on how to perform and things like that, and give them opportunities. So I love working with teenagers as well. It's very rewarding. Nate asked me to sing a song that was inspiring, so I figured I'll do this one. I wrote this song for my mother, so she has always inspired me, and it's called Brightest. Empty road feels like the wrong direction. If I look back, I only see rejection. If I look down, I'll only be second guessing. So I keep my sights set on you. In another lifetime, I was young and full of questions. Voices of the world, quite too much precision. Little by little, I tuned out the noise to listen to my heart that set on the truth. I cannot fail to be a constant driving force. Your eyes expect of me to raise the brightest torch. So much to want, so much to need, it blurs my vision. Walking on the line requires too much precision. Such great heights have always been my intention. So I sing my way to you. expect of me to raise the brightest torch? Driving force, your eyes expect of me to raise the brightest torch. The brightest torch.
We'll take a break. Go ahead and get your dessert. If you want some leftover dinner, eat the dinner. We'll give a yell back when we come back, and then you'll see some crafts on the back table. We'll actually instruct you